All right, I'm on. Let's do it.
Let's do it. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, what's going on?
Thank you so much for joining me on this Sunday morning.
You are so welcome.
You're the best. You are a speech pathologist. Is it speech and language pathologist?
Yes, the full term is speech language pathologist, but honestly, I call myself a speech therapist. It's just easier.
Yeah.
But not such a mouthful.
Yeah. No pun intended. Exactly.
That was a good one.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm funny. I'm real funny on Sundays. Just silly, more like it. You've been tremendously helpful for my daughter, Ava.
Well, thank you.
How many years?
So I've known you guys since 2015, but I didn't start working with her till it was right before Billy was born.
See, that's why I think I couldn't remember exactly, because you black out as the mom like a little bit.
Of course. Yeah, it was like right then, and I was at the daycare seeing another kid, and then I just ran into you, and you were about to give birth to Billy. So that was the end of 2017, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, because she's old now. She's 3.5.
Oh, she's 3.5 going on 13. Yes.
Yeah.
She's I at that time I was remembering back, I was really having a moment with Ava and her frustration with her physical limitations and starting to compare herself to her twin sister. And I said to you, I need to help her, help me help her verbalize that frustration.
Right. Yeah, she's still working on that, but she's getting there.
She is, but she's getting there, and she does some awesome things lately. Like the other day, she said, I'm just feeling very angry and I don't know why.
Oh, I love that. She did really nice the other day with like, with a little structure with the visual timer to be like, okay, like I know you're frustrated and we're gonna, here's the job, you're gonna do this for this long, and then you can do what you want to do. So that was very helpful for her too, which was nice.
She's come a long way.
Yes. Oh yeah, she has.
First, we're gonna work and then we'll do what you want to do.
Right. And that like being able to say, because it was funny, she was like, I said, what do you need to tell Sophie? And she said, I need to tell her I'm sorry. And then I said, for what? And she was able to verbalize, right? For yelling. I said, okay, you can tell her you're sorry for yelling. And she was able to tell her, and then we moved on.
That's huge.
Great. It's awesome.
And that's why another reason why I wanted to have this chat with you, because communication. It's just so important in every single way, from, each individual to any form of life, right? But also parent to child, and giving them the tools to communicate whatever their ability is. And the more I've learned about what you do, but I'm going to let you explain what you do. It's fascinating, all the many different ways you can help a child or an individual communicate what it is that they need. And I definitely want to touch on that. But let's pretend that no one knows what you do.
Okay. So one of the, I would say, like, just to make it broad. So I didn't know. When I went to grad school, I had no idea what I was doing. And I was like, I'm going to help kids say their R sound. And that was it. Like, that was what I thought I was doing. And there are, I believe, 9 different areas. So there's speech, right? Which is what most of us think of, like articulation, SRB, any sound you're having trouble with or speaking more clearly. There's language. You have the kids who have trouble understanding. So that's language comprehension. And then there's language expression, right? We're not using our language, using the correct grammar, or just using language appropriately. There's social language, which is your social skills and how you use your language to interact with other people. And then you have things that are more, there's stuttering. And then you have things that are more for other populations, right? So if you work in a hospital with somebody who's had a stroke, you can work on, it's called dysphagia, which is they have trouble swallowing. So you can work on swallowing skills with them. You have the people at the old, who have Alzheimer's, the older people, and you can work with them on cognitive skills. So they have trouble remembering. So how can we help them get past that, right? We may be able to improve their memory a little, but let's also work on, like, using strategies to help them figure things out. Um, and then I'm sure I'm missing some. I think there was 9 areas, but yeah, so what I do mainly is I work a lot with the kids from birth until I think the oldest I've ever done is 16. And my thing is really what I like to do the most is working on the language. So if you have the little ones who are not speaking and they're 2.5 years old, I think we forget that you should be speaking when you're 2.5 years old. You should be speaking a lot when you're 2.5 years old. So that's kind of my favorite, is doing those, and then doing some of the what I like to call executive functioning skills. And this is kind of where working on impulsivity, focusing, attention, being able to follow a task and complete it, being able to be flexible in your thinking. So I've kind of done all of that. Yeah, so it's all about communication. You can also do, I missed a big one. You and I had talked about like AAC, which is augmentative alternative communication. And I
Yes.
think a lot of parents are not happy with this idea, but it's a really cool thing. You have these kids who it's basically some kind of alternative, or augmentative is, it's going to help you in addition to speaking. So it could be pictures, could be sign language. You
Mhm.
could have I have some examples on my iPad of really cool, almost, speaking devices, right? They have pictures and you hit the button and it says the word.
Right.
So I have some kids that use this because they don't have language yet. And the research is showing that it helps them develop that language. And then I have some people who use this because they aren't going to be able to use their language, right? With someone with severe CP or some other neurological disorder that, they're really not going to be able to use their voice as their communication. So they'll use one of these.
And well, that's like a whole barrel of information right there, and that you've been such a great resource for when people on Little Wins have reached out and asked me, this is the situation with my child or my loved one. I'm a caregiver or I'm a parent. I want to help them communicate. I can't afford these assistive devices because, let's get real, Sarah, they're
They're insane. Yeah. And I've found, after we started talking, I found some more that are totally way more price. They might not be the best for that individual, but they're probably going to be a good place to start. And they're, I think, right. So right now what I have is the light versions of a bunch of them.
okay.
And the only difference, I think there's like 4 of them. The only difference is it doesn't speak out loud, which of course we want it to, for the person, but the full version is probably like $500 or something versus the big devices that are thousands of dollars. So I'll have to take a look at some of those for you and
Yeah.
just give you some of those.
If you'll shoot me over a list, I'd love to include that because I do get a lot of questions about it. And like you said, just any place to start. When some of the parents I've talked with, the desperation in their
Yeah.
voice, I completely understand, because their child may be screaming and throwing a tantrum, which is a form of communication. It's not the
Yeah.
one we're working towards, but they're desperate to communicate with their child, and it may be a situation like this, and all they need is a place to start. And what I think is really cool about these apps that you sent over a while back is the cause and effect. I remember when that was really helpful with Ava, when she couldn't remember. It was almost like, I think she was 2 or 3. If given too many choices, it was like, what? you
Right.
know
Right. There's too many things.
what?
Right.
So the buttons and the pictures and tactile, if you're tactile, the cards that you have and things like that, 2 choices, the cause and effect. If you push the button, this happens. If
Right.
you if you push this button, you get a cookie. That's a
Right.
great
Yeah.
start communication.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's where it starts, right? Like you want, especially when they're so young. That's always what I did with the younger ones, is like tell the parents that's what we want, is we want them to realize the function, right? And for a lot of my little ones, like pointing and grunting is their function. And so we're trying to get them beyond that, because that's not going to get them that far.
Mhm.
Um, so, that's what our job is, to figure out ways to get them to move on to other forms of communication. think a lot of parents are hesitant to use other forms of communication, but every single bit of research anywhere is showing that it's, if if your kid is going to be verbal, this is a way to help them be verbal. And it's okay. There are some kids who, at least, nowadays they're not calling it nonverbal, they're calling it pre-verbal, which I just learned,
Oh,
because you
right.
never know. I follow some apps, and there's a little girl who's 8 and she just started speaking, and she's 8 and she has autism, and she's been using a communication device for 7 years, and all of a sudden she started speaking. So you just don't know. There's, it really is kind of a cool thing to think of, like, she's not nonverbal because we don't know, if and when she's going to start using her words. But in the meantime, we can't just leave them with nothing.
No, absolutely not. So why do you think, this never even occurred to me. Why do you think parents wouldn't want to use or would be hesitant to use some other form of communication device?
Because they think it'll replace being verbal, and that
Oh,
their kids will never speak. That's what most parents say to me. If I give them pictures, they're never going to talk. If I use sign language, they're never going to talk. And it's just not true. Like, that's the opposite. They benefit from seeing the sign language. They benefit from seeing the pictures. It's just super beneficial.
well, I'm not a medical professional or a speech pathologist or
Right.
anything. I'm just a mom. But for me, communication, any way you can
Yep.
communicate to me, tell me what you want, tell me what you need. And I want to be able to tell you
Right.
in the way that you are going to understand,
Mhm.
and the ease and the joy in that. When Ava did start communicating, like we were saying, I'm frustrated
Yep.
or I don't understand. It was like every
Yeah.
single time. Yes. Thank you for telling me, as opposed to
Yeah. Oh
flipping
yeah.
the
Yep.
box of toys over and just screaming at me because I'm like,
Right. And I also remember you and I had talked about, like, sometimes they can't tell you in the moment, and that's okay. Like, we let them calm down, we help them calm down, and then we work with them on, like, next time, let's try this, right? Like,
yep.
I don't blame you if I'm really angry. Like, I probably am not just going to be like, I'm going to yell, right? Adults, it's an adult version of throwing a tantrum. We're going to yell,
Mhm.
and that's fine. Then we calm down, and then we talk to the person afterwards, and that's the same with kids. Like, if we can't catch it before they get upset, then we'll try to help them calm down, but I'm not going to try and be like, tell me right now what's going on. How are you feeling? What do they're
Yeah.
just shut down and get more angry.
Yes. And so do adults, I think.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
This has been really an incredible personal journey for me too, being able to work with you, all of you therapists, and learning these tools that we're giving to my kids with the calm down boxes in those moments. Like, here's a bunch of like kinetic toys or some thinking putty or something, or the one that, and they each like a different little thingy in their calm down boxes that I made for them. That's what I call them. Yeah. But Billy really loves the oil and water.
Yep.
You
I know
flip
what you're talking
over
about.
and you watch it trickle down, and breathing with that. Well, when the kids were like 2 and 3, I had not really thought of a calm down box yet. And in those moments, you're just as frustrated. It kind of freaks a parent out when they're acting like that. There's like a low level kind of freak out where you're like, what's wrong?
Right. What do I do? I don't know what to do. Yeah.
Yeah. But being able to say, let's take a deep breath and let's go to a calm place, and you play with your thing. And I need to do that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Everybody needs to do that
And
before.
Ava, on Thursday, she asked for some Play-Doh while we were talking. And I was like, go for it. If that's going to help, like, I know now, like, growing up, it's unfortunate, but, like, you go to school and they're like, don't doodle, you're not paying attention. And, like, to me, I couldn't pay attention if I wasn't doodling.
Wait, have we talked about this?
No.
I have
I
to.
just
Why do you
like,
think I always am? It bothers people. I think it's,
well, I'm playing with play right now because I
yeah.
can't pay attention if I'm not doing something.
How has this never come up? I
I
can't,
don't know.
I have to be doing one other small thing
Yes.
to hear and understand. I think it's just because I'm ADD, or maybe it's just, we're all different, but
Right.
I'm constantly doodling, and it always makes me sad when people are like, can you just look at me so I know that you're listening?
No, I'm like, I'm not. If I'm looking at you and I'm not doing something, I'm not listening, you know?
What is that?
Well, so in grad school, I told my professor, because I was like, I'm not trying to be rude, but listen, if I'm looking at you, I'm not paying attention. So
Hmm.
just, and he was like, that's fine, but you can't do that when you're younger. They won't let you, and it's so, I was working with a high schooler and she at her school, and she was like, I can't pay attention in class because I can't, she's like, they always tell me she's a great artist and she'd be like drawing cool things. And she's like, they always tell me to put it away, but they don't realize that like I'm paying attention when I do this. And she told me that. And I said, okay, well, let's go tell your teachers. And we did. And they were like, oh, I wish she would have told me that. Like, okay, great,
Yeah.
but you don't feel comfortable doing that when you're younger.
No, and that's where we have to step in, parents and therapists, and advocate for these things, because it's, I mean, what harm does it do? But that's how I memorize things.
Right.
And it's so interesting that you're bringing this up, because it came to me in my IEP meeting for Ava last week. They said she's really struggling with her focus,
Mhm.
especially when it comes to, test taking and all of these things. And so I say, what is the setting of
Mhm.
the test that you're doing?
Right.
Where does she go for that? And of course, it's like when we were kids, this teacher takes you into a room by yourself and you're
Right.
immediately like, bum, bum, bum. Like, it's so scary.
Right. Right. Like you're in trouble or something, right?
Why is it? And then I was a terrible test taker for that reason, because all of a sudden I was so nervous. And they would ask me, I'll never forget, in kindergarten, I messed up the ABCs. And I remember it to this day. Like, I remember the moment to this day, because I was so in my head about it that I couldn't remember. And I
Right.
was sitting there looking at the teacher, and my heart was pounding, and I was like, I can't remember the ABCs. It tripped me big time. And so
And Eva, yeah. Well, go ahead.
I said to them, could you give her some putty or Play-Doh or a ball? Don't make it fancy. It cannot be a princess. Don't
That,
go over. It
yep.
can't be overly colorful, because that'll be a distraction. If
Mhm.
it's just a ball, like a rubber ball, one color, if it's just some Play-Doh, just give her something to hold on to and to squeeze,
Mhm.
can be really comforting to her. And also it gives her whatever this is that we
Yeah.
have, where she to connect your thought to your speech, and
Mhm.
need to be holding something in your hands. Fascinating. But they
No.
said, oh, well, we never thought about that. Sure.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens. Hopefully it'll be helpful for her, like, and that's what's so interesting about Ava is like Ava's a really smart kid and people don't necessarily give her that chance because she has a hard time paying attention, right? She does.
Yes.
And they're like, oh, she doesn't know what I said. And I'm like, no, that's not true. It's not that she doesn't know what you just said. It's either it takes her a little longer to process what you said, or she wasn't paying a bit of attention to what you just said. It's not that she doesn't understand you. And I
Right.
remember we were upstairs one time and she said, she wanted to use, this was maybe a year and a half ago, she wanted to use her little toy vacuum cleaner. I was like, I think Stella has the toy vacuum cleaner. And she goes, how dare her? And she goes, well, in the meantime, I think we could use the broom instead. And I was like, okay, like, she was like, she might have even been 4 at that point. And I was like, who uses the word in the meantime when they're 4, right? I'm like, she has a great vocabulary. She knows what's going on. She can, it's just that it's just sometimes it's hard for her to pay attention to what you're talking about, and also some of that's age appropriate too.
Yeah. Well, is it age appropriate for us? I
Yeah.
feel like I have conversations every day with people where I'm like,
Right.
hello.
What you just said, please tell me 12 more times.
Yes, exactly. But I love that you see that, because I don't think every parent who has the ability to have a speech therapist for their loved one, because not everybody can afford it, insurance, all that.
I know we've talked about that and it's unfortunate, really.
Well, we're working on that. But for that speech therapist to then look to the parent and say, you're right, their cognitive level is this. And that relationship goes both ways. If you look at me and you say, Alexis, I don't think that she understands, and we're going to have to try this a different way. I have to be open to that.
Right.
Because we're all working towards the same goal. The feedback's not always going to be 80 and sunny and like butterflies and rainbows, but it's all good because it's a process to get there. But I always feel so fortunate whenever I've, really had to push for things at Ava's school or for other kids, and being able to reach out to you or Kelly or Diane, anyone in our team, and say, can you back me up on this?
Right. Let me tell you what she actually can do versus also there's a big difference between doing something one-on-one and then having a class full of people where you are going to get distracted. Like,
yes,
you're not going to show your true potential if that's, it's that sensory piece. Like, you're overwhelmed. There's a lot of people, there's a lot of visuals, there's a lot of this, there's a lot of that. Maybe she can't answer WH questions in the classroom because she's very overwhelmed. And I don't know if this is true or not, but just as an example, like maybe a kid can't answer those questions in the classroom, but when they're with me, they can, because in the classroom, it's just overwhelming for them. So
well, you have so much experience, but even to that point, in this same IEP meeting, when we're talking about her focus and they went through, the test taking, I said, okay, well, in the classroom, is she seated in her chair when you're asking her questions, or what? What's the scenario there? Do you know what they said? She's been in her walker. So she's standing at her desk in her walker.
Which is hard work.
Behind the plexiglass thingy with a mask over her nose and mouth, which I like throws my sensory system off big time. But standing for her, and I had to explain this to everyone at the IEP meeting. She
was in my way.
It's all good. My daughter has triplegia CP. In order for her to be standing in a walker, she has to work really hard. So standing at a desk for over an hour in a walker, that's, of course, it's going to fatigue her. They said she seems to get really tired. I'm like, well, yeah. She's going to get tired.
Trampoline for an hour while you're learning. And then maybe, that's what she's doing. She's putting forth that much effort that would be on a trampoline or something for that long,
And I have to give them credit because when I say these things, they do make adjustments. But I was shocked to hear that was what was going on, and that they would come to me and say, we're really deeply concerned about moving her into the next grade if she fatigues this quickly, and if her focus is this short, then we have concerns about that. And I was like, well, before we just hop to that, it's kind of like, what is the exact, show me what it looks like in these situations where you're seeing her focus fade. And it's sometimes something so simple as, is she standing? Or like you said, is there a lot going on around her? Is the sound, or
even some of those, like, I don't know how they would make it work, honestly, but those things they put up for, like, they never did this when I was younger, but now they do it. They put that little, have you ever seen those, like, it's like a board, like a cardboard, and you put it around your desk when you're taking a class test. So the other kids either don't distract you, or you can't look at theirs, or whatever it is. Like, those help the kids a lot, because then they're not like looking around, because they can't see anything when they're looking around. They have their little board up or whatever.
I bet there's a level of safety in that too. Like they feel like it's a private area, it's like a little
tent.
Yeah, little tent.
Which I know are popular in your house.
Yeah, we do tents here, all kinds.
You guys have a really cool tent with there was one day I came over and you guys were running late and I was hanging out with Billy, and you guys had this, like, gosh, I can't remember. Oh, not again. Excuse me while my mom tries to call me 15 times. I'm really popular. She might be the only one who ever calls me. No, you had some really cool tent. I bet you still have it. I think it was pink, and it had, like, you put the baby to sleep in there, and there's like a whole changing table or something. Yeah, that was fun. Billy and I were really having fun with that
I
one.
love tense. Oh my gosh, that's so funny. So speaking of Billy and Jonas, this whole when you started talking about stutters and like R's and THs and things like that,
Mhm.
at what age? So I still feel like Jonas has a really hard time with R's. Like at what age are we worried about that?
So here's the thing
Not
with
worried, but seeking some,
is he about to be 6 or he just turned 6?
no, he's about to be.
Yep. And he looks like he's taller than both the girls, isn't he? Or did he? He's so tall.
He wears like an 8. I know he's
Does everyone think they're triplets?
well, they did, and now he's so much taller. And that's been tough too in camp situations or classes where there's multiple ages since he was little, because he's always been a tall kid, where
Yeah.
people expect him to have more words
Right.
or to behave a certain way because he's tall. And I have to say, actually, he's 2. He's not
Right.
4.
Right. He's only 2 years old. He's just big.
Yeah.
So there are so many norms you can find, right? You can like Google speech sounds and when there's speech sound development and they come and I can show you some, but there's a new one. I don't know if I have it in front of me, I can grab it, but it's very interesting. So what they did, because they're all over the place, right? Like some of them would say, so some of the later developing sounds, no matter when they occur, are L, TH, R, sometimes S and Z, right? That's why you'll see the kid with like a little lisp at when they're first speaking. But it's interesting because they just did all this new research, and what they did is they took research. I don't remember what it's called. It's been a while, but they took all the old research and they reviewed all that research, and they came up with new norms. And they're really interesting because all the speech therapists are kind of freaking out, like, oh no, like because basically what they're saying is all of a sudden, when before it was like, you might not get R till you're 8. That was always like what it was. Like you might be 7 or 8 by the time you get your R. Now they're saying 5. And I'm like, if people are all going to get their R's by 5, like it's just incredible to me because, and I don't want to say it's not right because I'll get some, throwback on that one, but it's just interesting because I know of plenty of kids who don't have their R by 5 that will still develop it. So if you were looking for him, it also depends on if you have, right? My niece says, for example, like park is poik, like poik, almost like poik, right? And that is that is closer to a real R than pock, right? With like a W.
Okay.
So I have more concerns when the kids are getting older and everything's a W, wabbit, and any of those, pock, waddle, right? Versus like what she's doing. She's about to turn 5 and hers is kind of R-ish, but not quite an R. Um, it's a tricky question for those later developing sounds, right? Because you wouldn't most likely, if you were to bring Jonas in and you're like, he can't say R and can you test him at school? They'd be like, no, he's in kindergarten, right? He's, like there's 50 kids in here that can't say there are. But if you were going to bring him to a private clinic, they could treat it if it was something, however he does on the test that we give him. So it's tricky, but I would say if you're TH, I wouldn't even worry about till, gosh, I don't know, 7. R, 6, 7, some people definitely might disagree with me, but that's kind of my opinion.
Well, I'm with you on your opinion. And I like this is what are we on? This is a podcast where you should be able to speak freely. Okay. I'll fight viciously for that. But how could I do not like when they put an age, like one specific age on each thing or milestone or whatever. That's baloney. Just like when you said in the context of the little girl who started speaking at 8, like how can we, it's just a little bit tough. So what you said that I like the most is this is when between this range you should be seeing this. If you don't, here are the steps you could take for intervention or for speech therapy. And that's all we really need to know as parents. Like this whole they're walking by 2 and
right. And I it's tricky because one of the biggest things though that's been really pushed recently that I do agree with is, why are we waiting, right? You have a lot of doctors that'll be like, your kid's 18 months. Why are you worried about their speech? However, and there is research that shows, I think it was like, I don't know, at least 50, if not, it might have been like 60, 70%, right? If your kid's delayed in speaking when they're young, will most likely catch up. However, that still leaves a good 20, 30% that won't, and we don't know which one your kid is going to be. So especially that with early intervention being an option, which I know can be a little rough sometimes, but the process of it. But, you know, I absolutely am one who's like, go for it, right? You can get
Oh,
these services for cheap. If your kid qualifies, go for it, regardless of whether they will catch up or not. And there's also a lot of research that's showing that even if your kid is going to catch up in their speech and language, there's a lot of correlation between being a late talker and then having trouble reading. So it's like, get the help. If you can get the help, and I know past the age of 3, it's hard to get the help because schools are picky about, like, and I understand it. They can't just have everybody. They don't have the budget, right? So you have to like, it has to have a social or academic impact on you. I understand that, but that's some people's only option is to go through the school system. And then if the school says no, that's what we're trying to figure out is what do you do if you don't have insurance or something like that?
right. So would you say, in your opinion, if you like for Ava, we started speech therapy for the feeding piece,
Mhm.
which I never put together until we were
I
in
forgot
the
about that.
situation.
Yes, feeding
And
is an important one too.
feeding was huge for
Mhm,
her and how she moves her mouth in
mhm.
at that early age. Would you think that if someone, let's say someone's listening and they have, 16, 17, 18-month old with concerns for their feeding, if going forward, I'm for resources. I'm like you. I'm like therapy for everyone. Therapy all the way around.
Right, exactly.
But if you can, if you have access to it, but maybe it's that letter of medical necessity that you get early on, or some form of diagnosis, which is when the age piece does come in handy so that you can, well, handy, is that the right thing to say? Helpful. Um, when you can get, you need a diagnosis to get the care sometimes.
Yes.
And maybe at an early age, then you'll have a better chance of getting those services in school. Do you think?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. If you get, it's unfortunately the way it works is if you get early intervention, you can then transfer into school pretty easily. Um, it's harder if you don't. It's harder. You can still do it. There's things called, my niece just did for other things, but like there's something called child find. And it's basically, I used to do them sometimes. I think if you Google it, you could find out more, but it's basically, I think it's only for kids going into kindergarten or preschool or kindergarten, I think, could be wrong. But it's like, okay, I think there's something going on with my kid, I'm not sure. So you bring them to these timelines and they're really short and usually they're run like when I did them, it was a PT and OT and the kid came in for half an hour, maybe less. And we would just say, yes, we think they need an evaluation or no, we don't think they do. And if we did, we'd pass them on to the school system and the school system would evaluate them. But always, here's the thing, like, school is sometimes hard to get services through, but hold on, my internet's
I was
telling
just
me it's
gonna say, I
unstable.
like this is so
Okay.
important, and
School can be some,
kind of, you're kind of doing that.
yep, my internet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
So what they need to know, the people, where should they go? Where they start if they want to have their child evaluated, just to see if they need help. Where's that first starting?
So it depends if you're going private, right? Or if you're going to go through the school system. So privately, you can honestly easily Google speech and language clinic, right? That's around you. I can give you a bunch of recommendations too of places. They're just not necessarily super close to everybody. And that you call them, set up an appointment, and then you get a full evaluation. Very easy. Hopefully insurance will cover it. If not, a lot of them have package deals of, if you can do it, some people can't, right? So then if you have other concerns, it's a little bit harder. But what you can do is you can Google what's called child find and go that route. There should be, I can try and look up, like I said, my niece just did one recently. So I believe my sister just looked up child find study and then they had an email. that came up.
Okay.
And she emailed and said, we're just concerned with her speech. She got rejected, by the way, but hey, it was worth a shot. They were like,
It was
no,
worth a shot.
it was worth a shot. Her insurance won't cover speech. And so she was like, maybe she can get it in kindergarten. We'll see what happens. But in any case, like, it's tricky. She's missing some sound she should have at her age, but she, you know, who knows how she's doing academically when she's 4, she's doing fine. And we'll see how she does in kindergarten. But so do this child find study. You can also, I mean, the more you bring it up, the more you bring it up with the teacher and the principal and say, I have a lot of concerns, write it down, write a letter, because letters, you know, documentation. I have a lot of concerns with my kids' academic progress. I would like them tested to see if, you know, they need extra support. Letters, schools will take more seriously. If you want to really.
Absolutely. And the documentation, like, I took my kid in at this age, and while they didn't qualify for services at the time, this concern has, you know, maintained. And having those dates and that documentation and writing a letter, absolutely. It's always been successful for me.
Also, I don't want to say this, but I'm going to say it anyways. Throw in a piece about, like, I know what my rights are and I'm willing to advocate for my child is a good little something to throw in that letter.
I don't know why. I mean, we have to say this sometimes. I've been in moments where I'm like, you're not even ADA compliant. It's
Right.
just like, this is not actually legal. It's like,
yes. So I said, you know, you could either go the route where insurance in private insurance route, which is, you know, either you would go to a clinic, or sometimes, occasionally, if you're lucky, someone will come to your house. If you're birth to 3, they can come to your house. After 3, it really depends on where you get services. But yeah, I would just Google speech and language clinic close to wherever. Can you hear me now?
yes, I muted it because my elderly dog was coughing.
Oh, is that Theo?
Yeah, they told me he has seasonal allergies.
Sorry, that's super funny.
I just like, it is kind of funny. He just has this cough like a grumpy old man. So I didn't want to distract you. I muted myself. Sorry.
I don't realize that. No, that's funny.
He's fine. He's totally fine. He's thriving.
He's thriving. The other thing we can do is go through the child find. So what I just did is I Googled child find CPS, like Chicago Public Schools, and I got a website. Just if anybody needs it, you can call them at 773-251-4855. Or, yeah, I can give you the email also. It's a little longish. It's D like dog, M like mom, Fuller, FULLER, -Clark, CLARK, at cps.edu.
Okay.
So this is, and it looks like there's
and that's just for Chicago, but there's got to be
for Chicago, but you can Google, right? Like child find screening Wilmette, child find screening Winnetka School District, and these should come with it.
Or any city, right?
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't have to be Illinois.
Right. Okay. Awesome.
There should be something like that. Now, while I'm looking here, it says at least in Illinois, it looks like it's birth to 5. So I don't know why you would do it at birth when your kid's probably gonna, you're not in preschool at birth, but it does look like it's under 5 that you can use that. Now, if you're over 5, right, and you're in the schools, and let's say Stella started having trouble in school and you're like really concerned with it, it's harder, but this is where that piece of like, A, you can always go private clinic. B, you can keep documentation, keep her paperwork, keep her, she's doing really poorly in spelling, the teacher, or in reading, the teachers are saying she's having so much, trouble, and her reading is delayed significantly. And, you're going to bring it up, you're going to write down, I request this evaluation.
Mm-hmm.
And then
and you tell your pediatrician too. Tell your pediatrician, and you ask them for a letter of medical necessity. I need a letter of medical necessity for.
Correct.
Yes. And you take that straight over.
Correct.
You know what I was thinking when we were having
take
Wait, I'm sorry, what?
Take that and take anything you can.
Take it all. Yeah, totally. Absolutely. Especially when you're fighting insurance companies, just fax
Right.
the same information 77 times so they can never say they never received it.
Exactly.
That's my tactic. But I was thinking when we had issues with the internet, I think it would be helpful if I put together a template email for requesting services for your child, because I've done this so many times. Maybe, I don't know, maybe if it's English isn't your, primary language, or if you just don't even know what to say. Do you think that maybe that would be helpful?
I think that would be great. And this is where I'm going to bring up a company called Equipped for Equality. And this is a company that, let me just give you their number first. So this is just their main number, and then I'll tell you what they are. It's 312-341-0022. Now, this is only in Illinois. I would hope they have something similar, and I can ask them. So my sister works for this company. I would assume she knows if there's, other places, but it's basically a company for lower income families who are not getting, it could be many things, right? Like my kid, they're not testing him and they need to test him, and I'm frustrated and he's doing poorly in school and he's working hard and he can't, nobody's taking this seriously. You call them, they could give you that template, and all of a sudden, ta-da, like people take you seriously, right?
Yes. And if anyone has, I always say this because I've been through this, and you really do feel completely alone. You're like, well, I don't even know where to start. My child is frustrated. They're not happy. I want them to be happy. I need to know how to help them. And that can be so overwhelming. So I've always said, if you have questions, we have a forum for that, a Little Wins forum, where you can ask an entire community of individuals who have been through these things. You can email us at info@littlewins, and we'll be happy to give you anything that we have already, or like we've done, me and you, for any of these systems for assistive technology. We'll look into it ourselves. We want to help. We know how frustrating it is, and we'll be that resource.
Yeah, and people have connections, right? I mean, this is a great connection that I have. So it's like you contact them, and let's say, so if they email you and you're like, I don't know, then you reach out to other people, and then I find this, or Kelly finds that, or whatever, and we can figure it out that way. But
you call these places and like, like child find, you say, do you know if this exists somewhere else? Or do you what would be a great next step? Or do you have, because everyone does ultimately, especially in this community, want to help each other out. And usually, like you said, someone has a connection or another idea, or they've been through that one with someone else before. So,
so
no such thing as a dumb question.
No, definitely not. And for Equipped for Equality, I don't know what exists outside of Illinois. However, I can find that out, right? Because I can contact them and they can let me know, oh yeah, we have resources all over, whatever it is. But it's a great resource. It's a great, all of their services are free. I sound like I'm like, what's that called? When you're like a sponsor. I sound like I'm a sponsor.
Yeah.
But it's just really cool. It's free. It's for
incredible.
Yeah, it's for people with lower income that can't afford to, so like, help me. I need help. Can you help me figure out what to do? And they will, do that, or we'll do that.
Or we'll do that. Absolutely. Because this is extremely important. We're talking about communication, people. And that's by way of all of these different things. And that was one thing I wanted to really convey when we first hopped on, is the different forms of communication can be, like you said, sign language. It can be just body language.
Correct. And we're working up, right? Like we're working up to like whatever that kid's communication is going to be long-term, right? I mean, yes, the majority of us use our voice, and maybe that child will use their voice and maybe they won't, and that's okay, right? Like
maybe they'll use an eye gaze system.
I was just going to tell you an eye gaze story because it's so fun. So there is, if people don't know what they are, technology is super cool, right? So if you think of like an iPad, it's got pictures of, let's say, things for dinner, spaghetti and chicken and steak and hamburger. I don't know why I'm going with all the meats, but right, all sorts of food on that page. And you're like, what do you want? And your kid, if your kid has a really pretty significant disability and cannot use their voice and cannot, I have a little girl who I love, and she's Ava's age. She's going to be 8 in June. And she, she has a lot of spasticity. She can't control her head. She's in a wheelchair. She has a trach. She's pretty, significant medical history. And people will look at her and automatically think she doesn't know anything, right? And it is the funniest thing because she is feisty. And so she comes home from school. She's been doing online, and she comes home one day she had gone in for the first day, I don't know, February, whatever of this year. And she comes home and she has a nurse with her, and her nurse programmed in her device all of her new people, all the new names of the kids, because it was a new class. And I asked her and I said, did you have fun at school today? And she hits yes. And I'm like, great. Who did you enjoy playing with? And she hits the name, I'll call him, Bobby, right? She hits Bobby. And then she goes up to the other page and she goes, bad, Bobby, bad, Bobby, bad. And her nurse goes, yeah, Bobby took off his shirt today and was like, Bobby has like pretty severe autism, and Bobby had his shirt off and was pounding on his chest sitting by the window. And the like assistant principal came in and Bobby jumped on the assistant principal, like this whole long story. And I'm like, she's telling me exactly what happened. She doesn't have the vocabulary yet to go on and expand on that, but she's only been using this for a year. And all of a sudden she's able to tell me like, Bobby, no, Bobby, bad, like telling me a story of what was happening. And I'm like, so don't tell me this kid doesn't understand, because she just told me about her day, in the best way she could tell me. And it was and she's laughing, she's crying.
And now we're communicating, folks. Right. Like, it's so incredible. I get so hyped up about this.
And I forgot to mention, she's using her eyes doing this. We had talked about, right? So some people can push the buttons. She can't push the buttons. So she just looks at the screen and it recognizes what she's looking at. So she's using her eyes to tell me the story about what Bobby did at school that day. And I was dying. I was like, oh, well, Bobby had a rough first day of school.
First days are tough, Bobby. I get it, and I have a son. I don't know. I love kids when they do these things. And I know I understand autism. I get it. But I feel like, we're all a little bit different, a lot different. But to rip off his shirt and be pounding on his chest, like, yeah, way to express your inward feeling of just
right.
like,
he's like, I can't handle this.
Yes, I feel that. I totally get that. But what an awesome story. This technology, though, is so expensive, and I want it for every mom who calls me, or I have a woman who helps me translate other languages when they message me in a language I barely speak, English. So I need help with that. But I want to make sure that I can help them. If they reach out to me, they need help. Right. So I have this woman who will translate for me, and then I'll give her my response and she'll do it back. It's an incredible gift. But the stories are mostly women, mothers with their little ones, and they are desperately reaching out. I cannot communicate with my child. I do not know what they want. I don't know if there's pain in their body. I don't know if they're hungry. I don't know. And I just want to help them. And I think of them in those moments, because every mother's been there when your child isn't speaking yet. And you're just like, is it gas? Are you hungry? Are you tired?
Yeah.
And I just want you to feel good. It's deeply rooted in your central nervous system as a mother. And so I'm on the phone with you. I'm calling everybody. How do we get this? Yeah. I cannot find, and this is where I really think if Elon Musk could call me back.
You called him? Love it.
Oh, I feel like he's a genius, but he could definitely solve for this issue in like a lunch break. So if Elon could just call me and we could put together an eye gaze system that's more accessible to people, more affordable.
Here's the news about that though. Like, you have this kid, they're not communicating. You got them into, and I hate to only use Chicago Public Schools. It's just the one I know the most about, but I hate to only use that, right? That's one thing I need to learn more about is what about other countries? But for now, so let's say you have your kid in there, and guess what? Your kid's not communicating. They are required at Chicago public schools, at Winnetka public schools, at public schools, not private schools, to get your kid the device they need. When they argue with you and they fight with you, this is when you bring in the big guns and you say, okay, I'm going to call somebody. I'm going to call Equip for Equality. I'm going to talk to my doctor. I'm going to document, like, my kid cannot communicate with me, that you are required to pay for this device. And this little girl, her parents didn't buy it. The public school bought it. And
she can take it home?
She takes it home.
Wow, I didn't think you could do that, because
I don't know. Yeah, I do not know. Sometimes they won't. They need to let you take it home. They're required to let you take it home. They don't always, and parents don't fight back, because parents also don't always understand what your rights are. Right. And what your rights are. But I don't know now. My guess is that if she goes to another school, she can keep it, but I don't know that. I don't know that 100%. And this is like high-tech thousands of dollars item that she has, Is
it the Dynavox, the one like
she has, yes, hers is it's called Toby Dynavox. Yeah.
Yes, it's incredible.
It's amazing. I'm like, this is so cool. She loves to just explore it too. She just like goes all around it, checks it out. The other day I got on, we put on some greetings, right? Like, how are you? It's because we were just doing hi and bye. And I was like, let's get a little more exciting. So we put some more greetings, like, good afternoon, how are you? And she would hit goodbye. And I was like, excuse me. Like, she was like done with me, over and over, goodbye. And I'm like, no, I'm not leaving you. Like, we're hanging out right now.
Right.
They're sassy.
They are. That's how Ava is. When she figured out how to click off of Zoom, how about that?
Yeah, she'll ask me, can I leave now? I'm ready to leave. And I'm like, no, not quite yet.
But you have to be feisty. And that's why I love their spirits, because when you are in that chair, or if you can't speak, if you are impacted to the level that this amazing little girl is that you're talking about, it takes a fighter spirit like that. And their dry sense of humor, from my experience, they have this quick wit, dry sense of humor, sort of like you said. It's just, I love it. I love it so much. Okay. So that was one thing I really wanted to talk about, but you kind of jumped the gun. I was going to say, do you have a favorite story to share?
That's one of my favorite stories. I have another one. A little boy, gonna get a little obscene here, a little improper, words, but just kids walk out of the room. So I had a little boy that I was working with who wasn't speaking, and he was, I don't know, when I started with him, maybe 2. And in the early intervention system in Illinois, you go till 3, and then you'll go to the school system if you still need speech therapy, or you can go privately. And I was working with him, and his parents used some not so great language all the time in front of him. And one day there was like an ice cream truck out front. So his mom and I went, out front, and we got him ice cream. And then his mom like turned around, and he said like he was starting to get a lot of language at that point. He was almost 3. And he was like, walk? He wanted to go on a walk. I said, no, maybe mommy can take you on a walk. I have to leave. So he turned around to go back, to follow mom into the house. And he goes up to mom and he says, walk? And she goes, no, we can't go on a walk right now. So take your kids out of the room. He goes, you bitch.
Yeah. So
he used it appropriately. He overheard it. He's starting to develop his language, and he was like, okay, like, he told you.
It's probably startling for people who don't have children, with any special need or disability, but there is a language piece. And first of all, there's something going on in that home that should not be. We should not.
Yeah, there was a lot going on in that home. But
something that needs to be said. Anyways, when your child is struggling, I'll never forget when Ava first said, what'd she say? Jesus.
Yes, she says that now. I've heard her do that.
But I don't love it, but when it was early on and it was used appropriately, the pronunciation was great. If you think about it, it's not the easiest word to say. And so I was like, I'm going to take that as a win.
Yeah. Or the kids, you know, a lot of parents are like, gosh, they keep saying no. And I'm like, it is their way to like have some control. And that's one of the first words I think kids learn, honestly. That's one of
Yeah.
the first things they learn. And it's good. That's what they should, you know, that's what you're supposed to do.
Answer.
You're 2 and you're 3 and whatever. Like, no, I don't want to do this. Right. Like parents don't love it, but it's really appropriate. And I teach it to the kids because I think they need to learn it.
Have
To
you
have
seen those yes, no buttons? They sell them at
yeah,
Walgreens. I love those where it's just like, no.
right. It tells you what, yep, I know exactly what you're talking about.
So I saw them and one of my babysitters brought them over, which my kids had a blast with. But I was thinking about these families that reach out to me. I mean, I think it's like $5 at Walgreens. There's a red one that says no and a green one that says yes. And if you, you know, not everyone's child can, I mean, Ava could only use that with one hand. So if
Yes.
they have that motor, that mobility, and they can slap that button that says no, not only is it kind of funny for you too, because it says it in different voices and inflections,
Exactly.
but like going back to, are you hungry? Does your tummy
Yep.
hurt? Are you tired? These things that,
Well, there's also these recordable buttons that I'm looking at. I literally typed in recording buttons and it popped up that are on Amazon. These are like $12 or something, and you can record your voice. There's 4 of them, and you can record your voice. So you could put a picture on there, right? If we're talking basic, cheap communication where we need something somewhere to start from, you can swap out the pictures. I have some programs that are pretty darn cheap where you don't even need a program. You could just take a picture, make it, I don't know, 2x2 little square of water, you know,
yeah,
water, milk, juice, lemonade. What do you want to eat? And then they can hit the button, right? Just something basic, super basic. And obviously we're going to get more advanced than that, but something to start with. And then next time you throw on the button, you could even put on like tape on the back of it, just switch them out. Next time you throw, what do you want to eat? What do you want to drink? Where, you know, do you want to go to the park? Yes, no, you know, and you can record your voice on them. So it's something.
I love that. Will you send me? So I've written down all of these amazing resources, but when you have a free moment, which I've already taken up most of your free moments on a
You're
Sunday. So
good. I have my only job today is to go grocery shopping and to go hang out at the Poik with my niece and nephew.
like, oh, well, it's supposed to be nice today. So
Mhm.
that sounds perfect. But I want to be able to give these
Send
things
me an email of all the stuff you write down. That'll be easiest. And then I can, yeah, they're called just, it looks like recording buttons or something.
recording buttons. Okay. Um, all right. How long have you been doing this?
Since 2008, the end of 2008. So I went to undergrad at Washington University in St. Louis. And I always knew that I wanted to work with kids, but I'm not gonna lie, I'm not the best at discipline because I'm kind of a kid myself. So
Okay.
I was like, I can't teach. Like, I don't want to have tons of kids that I'm responsible for disciplining because I just wouldn't do it. So I didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I realized I started to think about either OT, speech, or PT. And then like my sophomore year, I took a linguistics class and I always liked learning languages. I've learned a bunch of languages. Just something that's interesting to me. So I majored in psychology and linguistics because my school did not have a major in speech. And that got me the prereqs. And then I went to Ohio State. And it's a 2-year program, master's program, and finished that in 2008, moved here, started working the next day. So I did schools for 6 years and also early intervention, so birth to 3 in the homes for 5 of those 6 years also. Then I switched to clinic, like outpatient clinics, and I've been doing that since 2015, I think, or 14, also doing early intervention as well. So yeah, I definitely don't, and I have it's nice because I have other friends that have, more knowledge about the adult side of things. Definitely not my specialty. But
Which
it's,
I want to learn more about because it's not my specialty either. But when people are reaching out to me, I want to always make sure that I'm educated on the topic. And
I'll ask one of my friends, she works for Rush, in the speech department at Rush. She would be a great resource too, for just like that adult part of the spectrum. She also does a ton of feeding with kids, but That's another thing that would be interesting to look at, because I don't have a ton of feeding experience.
I want to talk to her about my the adaptive spoon I made. I want to see if she likes
You
it.
made a spoon?
I did, because I didn't like any of the ones. They just weren't working for Ava.
Did you get that little I'm
They're
sure
weighted, they're like front loaded with the weight. So I redid it. I was tinkering around in my garage, like found a weight that felt good and some silicone, and I just made one for her and she loves it. So uh-oh, are you frozen? Am I back? Oh no,
yeah, it's my internet again. It's
oh no.
nope. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. This
Okay.
is just a test in our ability to remember what we were saying and jump right back in.
It's just my internet. No, the spoon. So what am I thinking? Easy grip. I think that's what they're called. Does Ava have one of those?
Easy hold grippers.
Yeah, like right. They like go around like if
Yeah.
it's a pen and
Yes.
it like goes.
Not only that, but I reached out to that founder. We did a podcast.
Oh, cool.
And I've partnered with her for giveaways. She is a hoot.
Those are cool. Those are so
genius.
great.
It's genius. It's
such a simple concept, but it's really smart.
She started making those prototypes in her kitchen.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm not creative, so
she's a total badass. And you reminded me too. Do you know Tim Caruso from Tekin, the Kids Equipment Network?
No. But I've seen you doing stuff with that.
Yeah, I did a podcast interview with him, and when you said you went to Washington University, he said the same thing, but he said, "Worse you," and now I'll never unhear it. Every time I hear that,
I went to work for you. Yeah.
Worse you. I just in case you guys know each other, he also
No,
does
but
work.
okay. Is
Just
he?
like him.
What did he major in, or is he's not a therapist at all?
He was a therapist, but I think he still does. No, maybe not now, because it's been hard for you guys with restrictions on going into homes and touching and all of that. I think for people to know you, especially.
I will tell you, Ava does better. As much of a hard time as she gives me on the computer, at first it was like a disaster for us. Like it was like me just trying to get her to stay on the computer.
Yep.
And now that she has somebody with her, she does better on the computer with me. She'll listen better to me than she will in person. In person, she's like, I don't want to do that. She'll lay on the ground, do her, her little sassy move. So we're getting a lot done on that computer, man. She tries to fight me on it, and then she just kind of gives up. She's like, okay.
That's always at the time I'm making dinner, which is right next to where you guys are.
Oh, yeah.
And sometimes the two of you make me laugh so hard. That's what's making it successful. It's the same thing I told Kelly, and I always say to Diane, the way we've been able to maintain this level of like rigorous therapy. She has a lot of therapy in a week, and it's because you guys have fun. You send me these printouts before.
Let me tell you, my printouts, I'm the least like artistic person. So I'm like, here's a template that somebody drew of a unicorn, and we're going to make it. Cause what I do a lot of with Ava is trying to work on like, the executive functioning skills. Like, can you attend to this while there's background noise, right? Can you focus on this? Can you plan, here's the finished product. How can we make this finished product? And she has to plan like which parts we glue on first to make it look like the final product. It's hard for her. It's tricky for her to like, first of all, to copy a pattern, right? To be like, this is what it's going to look like at the end. How do I make this? And then be flexible in her thinking, like, that didn't work. What am I going to do now? So that's kind of where all those printouts come from.
I'm loving it, especially loving that even though it's hard for her, it's hard for everyone, but that you're working on it, and that we came all the way back from where we were just trying to help her express her frustration to now we're working on executive function. I'm like, oh, like, yes, I love it. I think that's fantastic. I did do something before I let you go so that you can have a break. So you can have a break. On our Little Wins forum, I posted a question seeing if anyone wanted to ask you something. And there was one question in particular. You've answered all the other ones that I would love your help with. So this person said, I have a nonverbal.
Hold on, now we're freezing again. Of
Oh,
course
no.
we're freezing.
No.
Hold on, it'll come back.
Um,
Maybe.
you're good for me.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay, outstanding. Well,
Okay.
that's all we really need. I'm in a Sunday vibe today. I have a nonverbal 5-year-old great granddaughter. She has DiGeorge, is that correct? Syndrome? Did I pronounce that correctly?
Or syndrome, yes.
And has had 3 surgeries.
Man, we're having a rough time. I can hear you, but
Okay. One to align her rectum, one to put in a feeding tube directly in her stomach, and one to repair her heart. I just want to know if these children will ever talk later on.
that's a great question. I think I don't have here. So just in general, I mean, I know they want to have a specific answer. Hold on, let me fix something here.
Which is what I wanted to start by saying. I mean, again, every person is different. We could go back to the story about the 8-year-old who started talking. It's impossible, or to put the 5 on 5 years old to do your R's and your THs. It's impossible to do that. But if you have a form of an answer for this individual,
So kids with DiGeorge, they often will speak. They'll, speak later. Again, I don't, and they often have a lot of what's called reduced intelligibility. So it is going to be harder to understand them. They often have like what's called hypernasal, where they're going to have like air coming out of their nose a little bit. So it's going to make it harder. Like I was talking like this, it's going to make it harder to understand them. They probably would benefit from some kind of communication device to help them, especially when in those situations where, so I don't know, this kid's 5 is what she said?
I believe she said 5. Yes, 5 years old. Mhm.
So I was gonna, hold on, let me fix my internet here for a second. Okay, so I think that we don't know. I mean, we don't know. I can't predict the future. I wouldn't be surprised if she was able to speak in the future. In the meantime, I think it's extremely important to have some kind of communication system for her.
Yep.
If they're able to reach out, if they're able to, if she is getting speech language therapy, I think that's great. If they need support in figuring out how to do that, that's something they can reach out to us and we can help them figure out. I think that, sometimes these kids have a little bit of cognitive, or I think now it's called intellectual disability. I don't know what the correct terminology is right now, but that doesn't mean, right? Like just because you have a little bit of an intellectual disability doesn't mean you're not going to be able to understand. And that's something I think that's important too, is I have a feeling this child understands a lot of what you're telling her. And that's kind of where you and I had said, we have to find a way for her to communicate.
Yep.
And kind of, we have to accept the place that she's at, right? No, and I would love to say that 100% she's going to start talking, but without knowing her, we don't know that. Even if I did know her, we wouldn't know that. But getting her to the point where then she has the ability to tell you things. And I think it's also important to mention that kids aren't only telling you things they want. Think about like Ava and Stella and Jonas and Billy, right? They're telling you, like, they're making up stories. Yes. And they're telling you comments about things. Like they're telling you like, no, Stella got that one. I want the blue plate. Like, that's not fair, right? Like, it's not just, it's making comments about things. It's telling you, like, telling on each other. It's refusing to do something. There's so many things that we use, are answering questions, asking questions, right? And I think that's where like that social piece comes in. And you can do that. Like, just know that like she can do that. This little girl can do that. If she has access to communication device, she can do that using her communication device as well. And now that we're in this world where people, luckily, slowly, but are starting to, kids are starting to learn at a younger age what inclusion means. And like, I need to be a little bit more patient with this little girl who uses a communication device, but she can still talk to me,
And it's awesome because then it truly is, inclusion in classrooms is so important because it's just a mini version of the entire world,
Mhm.
right? Like the globe. We need to be able to understand that everybody walks, talks, everything differently.
Mhm.
And it's starting to just showing them that everyone is different from that, and that sometimes you do need to wait a little bit longer. But what is awesome about kids that I don't always see with adults is that they're psyched when they got through, when they were able to communicate, or if they understand they
Love
love it. They love it. And
it.
that is, yeah, hugely, hugely important. There's something you just
I
said.
also think it's important. I also think it's important for you to teach your kids that, like, you know, I don't know, that you can still play with these kids, right? Like, just because they are a little bit different than you. Like my nephew, he is very attracted to people that have autism. He thinks they're funny. He thinks they're great. He loves to play with them. And I love that about him, because I'm like, that's amazing. Like, he just has this like internal knowledge that, like, and he's always learned from when he was, he's Ava's age also, he's always been taught, like, it doesn't matter, right? Like, they talk differently than you do. Who cares? You can still
Oh,
play tag
how
with them.
fun is that? Yeah.
Like,
How fun is that?
like, just because Ava's in a walker, and like, I'm sure, I would assume you've experienced, I would hope, some kids that like play with Ava and learn that like they need to run a little bit slower so that Ava can have time to run in front of them, and that they just adapt to it. And they're like, okay, like, whatever. I mean, I
Mhm.
worked with a teacher who had no arms, and she was a kindergarten teacher. It was the coolest things. And she just sat the kids down at the beginning of the year and she said, "This is the way I am." And the kids were like, "Okay." And she wrote with her feet, and I mean, everything with her feet. And the kids thought nothing of it. It was just, oh, okay, cool.
That's amazing. She wrote with her feet. Yeah, I just got chills all over my body. It's so important. It is truly what the entire world is. If you have your eyes open and we have to understand. But even when on a small level, when Stella, Jonas, and Billy would say, "Mommy, why can't Ava walk?" Or "Why can't she do this?" Or "Why isn't she doing that?" And even when Ava would, but we've talked about that. I could say, "This is how I walk," which is differently from how you walk, and that's how that person walks, and whatever. Like, everybody's different. How boring would it be, guys, if we were all exactly the same? And then they're like, "Oh yeah." Yeah. But
And I also think it's important for them to learn, like, it's okay to ask questions. Like, I think a lot
yeah.
of parents don't. I'm sure you love it if like a kid comes up. Like, a lot of parents are like, I would rather, when your kid says, "Why is that kid in like a wheelchair?" And you hear it, and then mom's like, "Shh, you shouldn't say anything." I'm sure you'd rather have them come up and like talk to Ava and say, "Why are you in a wheelchair?" Or like talk to you, like,
Yep.
you know,
Instead of, I don't love as much when they come up and they're just staring. They're like
no.
in your bubble of space and they're just staring. That's when I usually say, it's okay to say hi.
Yes, and that's like a kid thing, and they learn it,
It
but
is.
like, I
It's an awkward and it's an important conversation because I am such an open person, and I know not everyone is, but I am fiercely protective of my children, but I understand other children too. So it's
right.
a delicate dance there where I want to invite a conversation, but if they continue, if you're rude one time or
Mhm.
or whatever, I'll just be like, it's rude to stare. Goodbye. Like,
Right. I think like
where's your
that's
mom?
the also like, why didn't yeah, right. Like, why,
Where's your
I think it's very typical for them to walk up and be like, to look when they have never seen, not like would be surprised, but I get that they're gonna walk up and look. But then that's where it's like the parent's job, I think, to be like, let's go talk to her. Let's go find, like, I bet she's exactly like you are. Like, just because her legs are working differently and she sits in a chair to walk, like, I bet you there's so many things, that are
It
similar.
looks like she likes purple. Isn't purple
Right.
your favorite color? It's so simple. It's like when we're at the park and some kid brought their favorite toy and everybody's like, all my kids are like, what is that toy? That it sort of comes from the same place where, what should we do here? Can we go over and talk to them? Or, would they share with me? And it's our job as parents to be able to say, yeah, let's go on over, let's say hi, let's see what it is, let's talk to them. And
And
it's
it's
so
also important.
simple.
It is. And I think it's also really important to teach Ava and other kids how to express themselves, like, and help her figure out how she wants to express it, because she's going to get people looking at her or people asking her questions, and she needs to feel comfortable with how she's responding. And it might take a while to figure out what that appropriate way for her to feel comfortable is, but she'll figure it out. I mean, I had a little boy who was in 2nd grade, and he had a syndrome where he really didn't have facial muscles. So his face was kind of just droopy, and like he would talk like this, and you couldn't, and people would be like, and he also had webbed fingers and like a lot of surgeries on his hand. And he would go, somebody would say, why do you have that? And he'd go, or they'd say, why does your face look like that? And he'd go, why does your face look like that? Like,
Precisely.
and he was amazing. I was like, if anybody could have this, like, it's him. He was just comfortable with himself. And he's like, what are you talking about? Like, this is just my face. Why does your face look like that? And it's like, it's everybody reacts different way. And you are going to get people who are rude. You are.
Yes,
But
they are. And I don't fault the kids. I will give them extra chances. I think children really just want to hang out with each other, but they haven't been shown or told or they just don't know what. And so for them, it's like any new thing for a child. That's why I reference a toy at the park. There's like where they're like,
this is different, whatever it is.
and it's our job to say, this is how she walks, these are her braces. I don't care. Tell them, when I've put new Ava in new classes, I've always written a letter to the parents explaining how, if they would
That's
like
cool.
to, if they need help, like what Ava's situation is, how to talk to your kids, and whatever. And I'm open, please ask me questions, but it's for inclusion, because it's so, like, the fact that we're still having these conversations gets frustrating to me sometimes. But one baby step at a time. I am so grateful I feel like we should have another follow-up on this, because I really want to dive a little bit deeper into if a child needs like sign language or eye gaze or body language,
Yeah, that's cool. A cool idea. Yeah. How to go through that process. Yeah.
and do that, and your experience with that, and kind of spitball some ideas, because it's one thing if your child is like mine, where she just needed a little help getting her conversation going and with a little intelligibility, if you remember from the beginning. But
yeah, now she's rocking on that. I'm like,
oh,
yeah, no trouble being understood.
she's got a lot of words. Yeah. Sharp ones sometimes too. But
Jesus.
Jesus, perfectly pronounced. Alrighty. But for the people who, their child or their loved one cannot speak, let's talk about that if and when you can.
Absolutely. The last thing I wanted to say is, like, don't be afraid to change your therapist. I think that's, people are nervous. They don't want to hurt people's feelings. And I totally understand that. But hold on, we froze again.
You're not
of course. Maybe next time I just need to come.
Okay. Yeah. Will you?
Please. Yeah, I'll come to your house next time. Then we can just be in the same room and stare at the screen together and have a funny looking conversation. I think I've had people, in quotation marks, fire me. I've had a handful. And most of the time it had to do with scheduling issues, but absolutely. I know it's weird and strange and whatever, but it's what your kid needs, right? Like, you find somebody who doesn't have that much experience. You don't know what you're getting. You go in and you're like, okay, I'm going to this clinic. You could have somebody right out of grad school, which, some kids, that's fine. Like, some kids who are working on articulation, that's great. But some of, like, more complex kids, like, you might not want that for your child. And I think it's important to do research and try them out. And that's okay. If it doesn't work, if the personalities, sometimes you'll get these people who are 65 who are just set in their ways. Not everyone is, but they're, 20-year-olds might be set in their ways too, but you can find what you need and that's okay,
And it's yet another part of communication, that conversation, it's just sort of only as awkward as you make it.
Yeah.
So I've found that multiple times where I've said along the way, I don't think this is working, or I disagree with you because I've seen her do this and I know she can do this. Or even when Jonas was in physical therapy for his feet or whatever, it's just a conversation and you're working together as a team. And like you said, if it's not working, if you have that initial conversation, like I think we need to focus on this, or expressing your concerns, and it still isn't working, absolutely. Therapists are there. You guys are very special people to dedicate your days, all of your time, the vast majority of your life, to improving the quality of life for everyone else. You're a really special breed of people. And I honestly think that that's important to keep in mind. You're there for a common goal. So absolutely feel free, I think.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean the therapist is bad, right? I mean, there's somebody who work well with that therapist. It just might not be you or your specific kid, and that's fine. So
and that's fine. Rock and roll. You got to find the person who does.
Right. So
Sara,
cool.
You rule. You're so great.
Oh, you rule.
No, thank you so much. For every single time I shoot you a random text like, hey, I had a question about this, and you respond, and everything you do for my daughter, for all my kids, and everything. I'm so grateful. Thank you for sharing your vast knowledge and your experience.
No worries. We'll meet again.
We shall meet again.
Exactly.
On Thursday at 4:00.
On Thursday at 4 p.m. Perfect.
So, thanks, Sara. Have an awesome day.
You too. Bye.
Bye.